Thank you. So the next session, we're going to be talking about digital inclusion and skills. I'd like to invite Adam Micklethwaite and Gareth Jones to come and join me. There are many statistics bandied around about the challenges around particularly digital skills. One striking one at the moment is that 17 million people in the UK lack the necessary digital skills for life and work, which is an absolutely extraordinary number. Clearly, we know from the conversation earlier with Adrian that there is a huge challenge around connectivity, but equally, once connected, do citizens have the necessary skills to actually get the most out of being online? And of course, we need to ask some key questions as well about what we mean by digital skills. Obviously, there's the hard skills, but also what you might term the softer skills. So those key skills around things like critical thinking, and increasingly you hear people talk rather than about digital skills, but much more about digital intelligence. Now, I'm going to be joined now by these two key contributors, so thank you very much for coming up. I think we're going to hear initially from Gareth Jones. He's a trustee at the Scouts, and then we will have time for questions at the end.
Okay, got some slides. Are these yours? Right, okay. Excellent. I was going to say good morning, but I think we've just tipped over into afternoon now. And obviously welcome, and welcome to this session on inclusion and education in the digital world. So my name's Gareth, and I'm a trustee for the Scouts. And I have a particular interest in the digital work that we do, and working a lot with our digital team and that. And obviously being 22, I think this puts me in a pretty good position to kind of understand what we're doing. So outside of my volunteer work, I'm a design engineering student at Imperial College London, where I'm completing my Masters. But having said that, I don't come from a purely academic background. I spent 6 months this year working as an interaction designer at a design consultancy called Else. But that's a bit about my background. But now what I'd really like to do is get into and share with you the truly fantastic work that the Scouts are doing across the UK to educate, empower and include young people and adults in the digital age. But more than that, across this talk and across the day, I would encourage you to ponder on this one point, and that is the importance of non-formal education in relation to the digital world. So we live in a world where being digitally minded, even digital first, is key. Where life happens on the internet, and where being a digital citizen is just as important as being a traditional one. Active citizenship is something we have always encouraged, giving young people the opportunity to get involved in their local communities and make a bigger difference. But in the digital world we have today, what can we as Scouts, and indeed as communities, do to help create a culture of good digital citizenship? For us, we see citizenship and digital citizenship as going hand in hand in the digital world. Popular terminology such as IRL, or in real life, SMH, representing shaking my head, or indeed the classic LOL, representing laugh out loud. These terms are used, which blurs the definition between the digital and the real world. So what are we doing about it? How can we educate young people in this space? Well, as Scouts, we believe in preparing young people with skills for life through a fun, adventurous and challenging programme. The Digital Citizenship Programme does just that. But as a movement, we continue to update our programmes, keeping them relevant, focused and engaging for young people. Currently, our programme focuses on the development of technical skills and digital concepts, which can support young people's understanding and use of digital tools. These range across 4 challenge badges and challenge experiences, which range in difficulty, building upon prior experience, thus giving young people the opportunity to continue to develop their skills throughout their time in Scouts. We're now bringing the idea of citizen first to the heart of our programme, and will begin to build a culture of good habits, attitudes, and the skills of good citizenship within a digital world. Our Scout values of integrity, respect, care, belief and cooperation also have a powerful part to play in this. But the most important thing to remember is that we aren't doing this in isolation. We're so pleased to be partnering with Nominet on the development of this programme. It's partnerships like these that help us to continue to design and deliver quality programmes that are relevant to young people and adults too, and that provide those core skills for life that I spoke about before. Having worked in digital design, I understand the vital importance of digital inclusion. For example, the contrast between colours online is vital to online inclusion and is often overlooked. But by utilising resources such as web content accessibility guidelines, we can ensure that accessibility and inclusion are at the heart of what we do. So what can be done to support digital accessibility? In May 2018, we launched our new brand and visual identity, as you can see here. A brand that has given our image a new lease of life and has enabled us to begin changing the perceptions of what we do. But this also gave us the opportunity to bring forward a brand that's bolder, stronger, and more optimised for digital use. Focusing on the digital aspect of our new brand, we were able to concentrate on the different options we had, making our brand accessible. Our colour palette is the best demonstration of how we can make our content on and offline as accessible as possible. So let's take the Scout Purple, for example. We utilise a purple background with a white logo and text, which comes up as 7.33 to 1 on the contrast ratio scale. The top level from the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines recommends a contrast ratio of 7 to 1. But our colour palette also includes on-brand colours such as pink and yellow, which, as you can see from the slide, show a greater contrast of 12.91 to 1 and 16.6 to 1, respectively. These colour schemes are a stepping stone in becoming more and more inclusive online and ensuring that the way we work digitally is accessible to all. The great thing about being digitally accessible is that you can also be transferred to offline work. Here at the Scouts, providing an inclusive environment is core to our values, and ensuring that even simple items such as name badges can be more accessible is what we're striving for. Here we've utilised the contrast ratio with our name badges to provide two types, a recognisable Scout colour with the purple and white, and a highly accessible version with the yellow and black, which is much easier for those with visual impairments to read. But this is only just the tip of the iceberg. I've spoken to you about some of the things Scouts are doing around education in the digital era, and about how we can be accessible to all online. There is so much more to be done. There are communities across the UK who struggle to access the online world, and a growing elderly population who are becoming more and more isolated from the real world because we've not been inclusive. As Scouts, we believe that this can be addressed through social action and projects such as our A Million Hands campaign, which aims to extend our reach into the local community and support more and more of those young people and adults who need it the most. I suppose then my final question for you is the same as the point I made right at the beginning. Does non-formal education have a role to play in the digital world we live in? And I'll leave that one with you to decide. Thank you.
I'll hand over to Adam, and then we'll take some questions from the audience.
Hello, everybody. So I'm going to give you 4 thoughts, or probably more correctly 4 provocations about digital inclusion to play into the conversation that we're going to have today. And I think my answer to Gareth's final question is yes, but we'll come on to that in a second. So here's the first. There's still a digital divide in the UK, and it falls along the lines of other forms of inequality. So if you look at data from Ofcom, and also ONS, and the Consumer Digital Index published by Lloyds Banking Group, you can see that between 9% and 13%, somewhere in that region, of adults in the UK don't use the internet. They do not use it. And that is, broadly speaking, the same as it was in 2014. So the digital divide is still there, and it's not really moving. 6 million adults cannot turn on a device, 7 million adults cannot open an app, 11.9 million adults lack at least one of the essential digital skills that most of us would take for granted, and over half of those who are in work also lack one of the essential digital skills, one or more of the skills they need to thrive in a future work environment. People who are offline or only use the internet in a limited way, and there are 22% of adults who are online but have very limited internet usage, are more likely to have low incomes, more likely to have low education, more likely to have a disability, and more likely to be older. Although it's not just about people in later life. There are quite considerable numbers of people in the older working age population and also in midlife who are offline. So overwhelmingly, digital exclusion affects the most vulnerable in society. And of course, I almost don't need to say it, but it's a compounding inequality. So being digitally excluded makes it less likely that you're going to be able to find the opportunities to improve your lives in the way that you need to. Digital exclusion in this sense reinforces and entrenches social exclusion. A good example of this is that the average household can be over £700 better off if they're online compared to if they're offline. That's figures from Lloyds again. So as well as it being a big problem now, obviously, we're not really addressing this fast enough. So in 2018, Good Things Foundation commissioned CEBR to produce an analysis of future trends in digital inclusion. And that report estimated that by 2028, so 10 years on from where we were last year, there would still be 6.9 million people that lacked at least one essential digital skill, unless we do more now to accelerate progress in helping people to cross the digital divide. Meanwhile, digital continues to transform the world, as we're hearing about today. More and more services are becoming digitised, and more people are falling behind. So that's my first provocation. Second one, digital inclusion is about people, not tech. Making the internet accessible, easy to use, hiding the wiring, as we're seeing with voice control. Lots of the great stuff that Gareth was talking about with design. All of that is clearly very important, but it's not the whole story. By far, the two biggest reasons people who are offline are motivational. Either because they say, I'm not interested, I just don't see the point. What has the internet got to offer to me? Why would I bother? Or I don't trust it. For all of the reasons that we heard about in the previous presentation, all that fantastic data. So those are the two biggest reasons, and addressing those reasons, A, takes time, and B, has to be in the personal context of that individual's life. You can't just say, we're going to teach you how to use digital skills. It's not that simple. So the basis for digital inclusion is a personal relationship between me and you, and me talking to you, building that relationship and helping you over time to progress to a point where you have the confidence to go online and benefit from the internet. And because the most vulnerable are most likely to be offline, the community sector, and I say that in its broadest sense, so everything from libraries to small charities to small community groups, who already support people to overcome a whole range of different social exclusions, and indeed to interface with government services like universal credit, the community sector in its broadest sense are best placed to help these people cross the digital divide. This is about getting to know people, as I've said, understanding what makes them tick, and then finding a personal hook that's going to be the way in, if you like, to their conversation about digital. It could help me to communicate better with my family. It could help me do something I have to do, like universal credit. It could help me improve my health and well-being. Thousands of community organisations in the UK know that the people they support need essential digital skills, but many don't use digital to deliver their impact. So at Good Things Foundation, we work with those organisations to help them build digital into what they do. So it goes with the grain of their social mission. So that's the second one. People, not tech. Third one, building our digital future needs partnership. So we've heard a lot about partnership today. We've just heard about the great partnership between the Scouts and Nominet. It's fantastic. But the scale of the challenge here is bigger than any one organisation. So at Good Things Foundation, we've helped almost 3 million people since 2010 to cross the digital divide, and lots of other organisations have done similar things. But we need governments, the private sector and civil society all to play their part. This has to be a joint endeavour, it has to be a shared partnership based on shared values if we are going to eradicate digital exclusion. By the way, as an aside, we fully understand that you're probably never going to get literally 100% digital inclusion because there will be some people for very good reasons at the margins who will not be able to do that. But nevertheless, that's no reason not to help them be able to benefit from the internet, for example, through proxy use, through friends and family. Just a quick aside. This has to be a broad church partnership, and happily lots is happening. So apologies, this has already been mentioned today. The government has a digital skills partnership which brings together the DCMS with organisations in the private sector and civil society. A new initiative was launched by the Lord Mayor of the City of London, Peter Estlin, 2 weeks ago, called Future.now. which is a big collaboration and a call to action to the private sector to do more on digital skills. And for our parts, to go alongside the partnerships we've already heard with Nominet and the Scouts, we have partnerships with Google.org, so the philanthropy part of Google, JP Morgan Chase Foundation, BT in this country, Accenture. All of these are very exciting partnerships, and they all represent the private sector putting back in to this important task of eradicating digital exclusion. But there's always more that can be done. And in particular, employers doing more to invest in the essential digital skills of their own workforce is an area that we think needs continuing attention. It is a core focus of the Future.Now initiative that I just mentioned. But above all, I think it's important that we think together about what sort of future world we want to create using digital, using technology, and then act together to create that world. And our focus at Good Things Foundation is ultimately about trying to influence and catalyse that action. Final one, digital is both a leveller and an opportunity. So Good Things Foundation, our mission is to help create a digitally equal world. This means one where digital is not reinforcing social exclusion, but is used actively to remove exclusion and to create opportunity. We still need a big effort, as I've said, to help the most vulnerable, but beyond that, I think, and this is the opportunity part of the provocation, there's an even bigger idea. I think Ellie referenced it briefly just then when she spoke about digital intelligence. This is the idea that we all need to live well in the digital world, so we need a big effort to help the most vulnerable, but we should raise our sights and think about everybody. This is about the demands that technology are going to place on how we act, how we think, and how we live. Again, we're starting to see some of the trends come through from the Ofcom data. It's also about how we can adapt to those changes both individually and also collectively, working together. So we're interested in exploring this idea from a very practical standpoint, because we should be acting on this now. With Google.org, we're exploring how to work with people who are limited users of the internet and ideally try and unstick them so that they build their confidence to learn and keep learning about more and more digital skills. With Accenture, we're exploring the wider behaviours and attributes that go around digital skills, that you need to exist in a future world of work. We're also interested, beyond that, in the idea of a coordinated and concerted programme of public learning for a digital world. What might that kind of public education drive look like? Who might deliver it? I think, to the previous point, civil society would play a key role. So this is important stuff, not only just at a UK level, but at a global level. And for us, this idea represents the next obvious frontier for thinking about digital inclusion. So those are my 4 provocations. And just to finish with, that's an infographic. It's on our website if you want to download it. It's just a helpful summary of the main stats on digital exclusion, presented in a fun and engaging way. So please feel free to download that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So, thank you both very much. You're actually asking some really sort of challenging questions there. And I just wanted to hone in on that point about, the numbers aren't changing, and that is extremely concerning. But how, and when the numbers aren't changing, and we're then talking about trying to engage people in a sense of continuous learning, that this isn't something you can just get and then it's okay. How do you think we can best attack that? And what role do you see? You talked a bit about the role of government versus private sector. But what role do you see for the different players in that?
Can you hear me? Okay. Yep. So the first point to make, I think the obvious point is that the more you do, the harder it gets, because you're getting into more people who are going to be harder to shift. But I think the key point is about investing in people as well as tech. So going back to that previous point, we saw a great new commitment from the government the other week to invest more in broadband. So 5 billion, which is great, a huge amount of money, to continue to bring broadband to everybody that needs it. But the immediate challenge is, well, yes, you can invest in the pipes in the ground and the wires in the ground, but you also need to invest in the people that can help people to benefit from that new technology, so that you are truly creating a digital world for everybody. So I think alongside the continuing investment in tech and the continuing improvements in tech, we need more investment. So something like 2-3% of that 5 billion would make a big dent in digital exclusion. So it's not a lot that needs to be invested. But also the partnership point I spoke about, there need to be more organisations who are all pulling in the same direction, and putting not just their their shoulder behind this, but their actual money behind this. We do need to invest in the people that can help this movement to continue to grow. The answer, if there is one, to helping the people who are going to take the most work and the most time and the most behaviour change, I suppose, to get to the point where they can behave with, interact with technology in the way that we do, is a people answer. It's about really creating that link between them and the people that they trust in local communities, and keeping it there. So I think this is we're very, not only ambitious, but we're very optimistic at Good Things Foundation. We think we can solve this problem, but we do need investment and we do need commitment, and we need to remember that we have to invest in people. That's my message overall above everything else. I think it's people as well as tech.
Okay, thank you. Now, I mean, obviously the Scouts play a really important role sitting alongside the more formal education sector. We've had an interesting question in from the audience around digital inclusion and its relationship to education, and what changes are required to the government's primary and pre-primary education strategies to support better digital inclusion. I don't know if either of you would like to pitch in on that.
Yeah, so I think from a governmental perspective, there's always going to be a huge amount of emphasis on the education sector. And that usually revolves around schools and universities and the generic way of how we think about academia. Those areas are very underfunded, very resource heavy, under a lot of stress and a lot of regulations. So this is where I particularly believe that there's a role for non-formal education. And I think some of the work that we're doing in terms of getting out to communities, supporting local people. Take Dementia Friends, for an example. That was one of our partners for our A Million Hands project in the last run. We have thousands of Dementia Friend trained young people across the UK who can go out into those communities and provide that support. The same sort of thing can happen with additional funding for things like digital inclusion. We can go out into those local communities, we can support young people and adults who need us the most. And I think if we can link together, not just to Scouts, but Scouts, Guides, all sorts of the charity sector, we're supporting young people. We're growing sustainably in that sense. If we can support young people to deliver these sorts of things, then we can grow that sustainably across generations, not just thinking, how do we focus on one particular area?
Thank you. And this absolutely underpins your thinking at Good Things Foundation.
Yeah, so I'd completely agree with that, and I'd make three more points, I think. One is so to the point about primary and pre-primary, how early, where do you start? How early do you go? Do you try and, there's something called the earliest foundation stage, do you try and build digital literacy into that, for example, so that 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds are starting to learn about this. I think I don't have an answer to that, but I think the key thing is to keep the conversation, or to make the conversation happen at a local level. So again, back to people, talking to people within their community, friends, family, and underpinned by a solid basis of knowledge, I suppose, at the adult level about what needs to happen. The second thing is the obvious point about the essential digital skills of teachers, of the workforce, and I think there's still more that needs to be done there. And then the third point, this is my kind of big heretical point, the education system as a whole. I think there is a strong case for reviewing it and thinking about how we could redesign it for a future digital world. There are lots of ways in which the current education system is not set up to be either agile enough to cope with the changes as they come, or geared up in the right way to help the sort of mindset and the behaviours develop. There are clearly fantastic examples of that going on in isolated pockets across the country and indeed across the world, but I do think there is a good conversation to be had about how the education system can be more responsive to these changes and can teach and create a learning environment in which we can develop the sorts of capabilities that we haven't even started to think about.
We've got a great question here about, it's one thing to talk about the digital divide, but once we really start to address that, what about the privacy and security divide? And is privacy going to be a luxury in the future for only those that can really afford it? How do we make sure that, as well as those basic skills, we're also supporting those more sophisticated skills in terms of how people then are interacting online?
Shall I kick off?
Please.
So this is probably well known, but the government in fact, a consortium of organisations published an essential digital skills framework for the UK a year and a bit ago, and it's now been adopted by the Crown. It's now being used as the basis for new standards for qualifications. So IT qualifications were frankly hopelessly out of date, and they're being updated, I'm pleased to say, as a result of this work. So there are 5 essential digital skills, and one of them is focusing on safety. And that's exactly as it should be. It shouldn't be over there somewhere. It should be, on an equal level with all of the other skills. managing information, transacting, problem solving, and so on. So I think the one immediate answer is to say, well, that safety focus needs to be, yes, it needs to be built into qualifications, but it needs to be prioritised by educational providers, and it also needs to be embedded, not just bolted on, embedded into the practice of digital inclusion wherever it is happening. So at Good Things Foundation, we have been, since the publication of the framework, been thinking very hard about how we build and strengthen the online safety component in our own offer. We have a learning platform which has lots of different courses on it, designed particularly for people that have low digital confidence and skills. Part of that is around online safety, and we're doing a lot of thinking at the moment to understand how that can be sort of woven across the piece rather than just an isolated module, if you like. So there's something about embedding it and making sure that every new capability that you learn, you are considering the privacy and the safety implications. We say that people should be digitally able, equal, and safe. So we've sort of worked that into our outcomes framework as well. So it's very, very important.
Yeah, I think kind of just to add on to that, and I agree with what's been said about this previously, is that privacy and security do go hand in hand. But I think the paramount point of the privacy section is actually you can decide how much you want to put online. You can decide how much you want to share and want to share with others. So I think the educational side of privacy, I think, is the most important point. How do we educate everyone, not just young people, but everyone, about what actually, when they're signing on to things, what does that mean in terms of their private information? And actually understanding how the rules of privacy work, and how when you put something on there, say you put something on Facebook and someone instantly likes it, how many other people are going to see that? I think we accept that it's a thing, but I don't think we understand at the moment. And I think there's a big part to play in educating specifically young people in that, because one of our core values and the paramount to anything else that we do is we want to keep young people safe when they scout, and that includes online. So we train our leaders in how to combat things like that, how to work with young people who are living their world online, and actually how do we educate them. I think that is the paramount thing of what we should be focusing on, because obviously privacy and security do go hand in hand.
Absolutely.
Can I make one further point? I think it was Matthew Taylor at the RSA, so this a little kind of bon mot that he had, which is that most government policy fails. The policy that succeeds reinforces a social change that is already underway, which is quite a nice thought. But and the examples are things like the smoking ban, the minimum wage. So there is something in here also, I think, particularly in terms of safety, around sort of creating that social change, so it becomes normalised. It becomes absolutely normal for young people as they grow and as they into their adolescent years and beyond, that they are thinking and acting in a way that is normal about online safety. They're doing all the right things. This is not a plug for Google, but my daughter recently did the Be Internet Legends thing that Google have produced, which is like a game, and I really noticed that she was starting to think and act and speak differently after doing this. It only took about an hour and a half to go through it, so there's a series of different games that teach you different things about online safety. But that just seemed to me a good example of a behaviour change starting to lodge in a way that was, ultimately good for her, good for the person. So there's something there about how do we scale that kind of thing and create a social change where this becomes normal, particularly seeding it at an early age.
And what do you think about how people are interacting in terms of things like websites and terms and conditions? And there's a question here that talks about them as being as user-friendly as a cornered rat. So how do you support people, not just at those sort of general digital skills, but then actually to interact as more educated users? Is there a role, or should there be obligations on businesses in that regard?
Probably not. I think the onus here probably rests with the individual. But again, you're back to the support and the support that they get in order to build their capability. we have found, it's not quite answering the question, but we have found in a lot of the work that we've done with government, for example, on assisted digital services. This is thinking about what support you can provide to people to help them to use a transactional service. So that's about building their skills, it's more about using the service. That we have in the process uncovered new insights, new data, particularly from people that are vulnerable and maybe lack digital confidence and skills, that has then helped to shape the service and has led to slightly different design decisions being taken about how particular forms will work, the ordering of different things within a service, the phraseology that's used. So yeah, I can get with the user-friendly as a corner wrap point.
Yeah, no, I would completely agree with you. I think the onus is on the individual, because obviously you are, as a person, subscribing to whatever it is you're subscribing to. And I think kind of the whole part of this conversation is that education is key. And clearly, I think from this discussion, I don't think we're doing it right. There's a lot more we could be doing. But in terms of interactive, I think that's an interesting space where innovation hasn't reached yet. I think we could be a lot more engaging in the way that we explain terms and conditions, and engaging in the way that we explain actually what it is you're signing up to. Be that video graphic, be that infographic, or any kind of setup like that. I think that would draw people's attention more to understanding what it is they're doing and they're signing up to. I think that everyone's got a part to play in that.
Fantastic, thank you. And thank you very much for the questions from the audience. We'll wrap that up now, thank you.
Thanks. Thank you.
And now we have lunch, I believe. Thank you.